Our third story is Pamela Painter's Reading in His Wake, read by Marcia Harden and recorded live at Guildhall in East Hampton, New York, where it was performed as part of our 30th anniversary benefit for the Pushcart Prize.
"At last," my husband said, when I had locked up for the night and come to bed. "You knew I would," I said, "but I didn't know when." Propped up in the recently rented hospital bed, he peered more closely at my chosen book, a novel by Patrick O'Brian. "Wait, no," he said. "You must begin at the beginning." "But I like the sound of this one," I said, drawing out the swish of the Mauritius command. But you want to be there when Aubrey and Maturin meet." "I can always go back," I said, only slightly petulant. Aware that at another time we'd never see again, I would have been reading favorites, Trevor, Atwood, or Monroe, or tapping into the wall of biographies across from our beds, Rowley's Christina Stead, or Ellman's Joyce, continuing through the poetry at the top of the stairs, Rivard, Retke, Ruffel, Schulemann, Szymborska. His eyes gleamed. But Aubrey and Maturin meet at such an unlikely place. Especially to begin the series, they meet at a concert. Italians on little gilt chairs are playing Locatelli. He stopped out of breath. "Never mind." "So, what's the first one?" If I was going to do this, give him this gift, so to speak, I must do it right. He named Master and Commander, and ignoring the irony, I did as commanded and retrieved Master and Commander from his study next door. Carefully, I settled in beside him, our old queen set flush to his new bed, and embarked. In running commentary over years of hurried breakfasts and long dinners, he'd extolled to me Patrick O'Brian's sheer genius, how in the first novel he delivers to the reader, in dramatic scenes of tense negotiation, a detailed account of everything that Jack Aubrey must buy to outfit a ship circa 1859. 4 pages, and an introduction later, I said, "I see what you mean. A most prickly meeting." Maturin, delightfully pissy because a rapt Aubrey from his seat in the scraggly audience is audibly conducting the quartet a half-beat ahead. "Don't forget their terse exchange of addresses, as if for a duel," he said, laughing and coughing. I looked toward the oxygen machine, then at him. He shook his head. Relieved, I slid the damp shoulder of his nightshirt into place. "Conflict on page 1, I said, making us both happy. 50 pages later, when I murmured, he said, "What? Tell me." He turned on the pillow with an effort and put aside his own O'Brian, The True Love. So I read for him. The sun popped up from behind St. Philip's Fort. It did, in fact, pop up, flattened sideways like a lemon in the morning haze, and drawing its bottom free of the land with a distinct jerk. "Distinct jerk," he repeated. I said again, "Drawing its bottom free of the land with a distinct jerk." A shared blanket of satisfaction settled over us, and we went back to our books, companionably together and companionably apart. When I stopped reading to bring him a fresh glass of water to chase his myriad pills, he wanted to know where I was now. I slipped back into bed and tented the book on my flannel chest as I described how Mowat, an earnest member of the square-rigged ship's crew, is explaining sails to a queasy Maturin, and here my husband smiled wryly in queasy recognition of feeling queasy. I took his hand and went on to describe how Maturin affects interest, although he's exceedingly dismayed to be getting this lesson at the appalling height of 40 feet above the roiling seas. Meanwhile, the reader is getting the lesson too, and drama at the same time. Here, and I read, "The rail passed slowly under Stephen's downward gaze, to be followed by the sea. His grip on the ratlines tightened with cataleptic strength." "It makes me want to start all over again," my husband said. "You could read Dave Barry now," I said, acknowledging the only good thing about our new sleeping arrangement. My husband used to read Barry's essays in bed, laughing so hard the bed would shake me loose from whatever I was reading. Annoyed, I'd mark my page and say, "Okay, read it to me." The ensuing excerpt was a tone change and mood swing one too many times because I finally banished Dave Barry from the bed after his column titled "There's Nothing Like Feeling Flush," which had my husband out of bed and pacing with laughter. In it, Dave Barry refers to an article published in a Scottish medical journal, "The Collapse of Toilets in Glasgow." Barry says, "The article describes the collapsing toilet incidents in clinical scientific terminology, which contrasts nicely with a close-up, full-face photograph, suitable for framing, of a hairy and hefty victim's naked wounded butt, mooning out of the page at you, causing you to think, for reasons you cannot explain, of Pat Buchanan." We said it again and again. It answered everything. "For reasons you cannot explain." "Do you want a Barry book?" I asked. He didn't answer. He was either sleeping or wishing I would shut up. When we were about to leave for radiation, he was still bereft of a new O'Brien. I found him standing in his study, leaning on a walking stick from his collection, now no longer an affectation. "The W's are too high," he said, stabbing the air with his stick. "It's Woodhouse I'm after." "Why Woodhouse?" I said. Jeeves, the perfect valet and gentleman's gentleman, would be totally disapproving of how my husband's shirts went unironed and how his trousers drooped on his thinning hips. "I'm almost finished with Trevor's After Rain. It has a startlingly dark story about... I think I'll read Woodhouse," he said, his jaw set. Out of breath, he slumped into his chair and pointed again. "But I can't reach him." On the shelves behind where my husband was pointing ranged the 200-plus books he'd edited at a Boston publishing house, and the 4 he'd written. The last novel, A Secret History of Time to Come, included by the New York Museum of Natural History in a time capsule that would outlast us all. "We have too many books," he said. "That's what you always say," I said. Hitching up my skirt before the wall of English and European fiction, I mounted the wobbly wooden ladder we swore at on principle every time we retrieved an out-of-reach book. Wall, Winterson, Woodhouse. I called down 3 titles before he nodded at the 4th. The Code of the Woosters. "Why Woodhouse?" I asked again on my descent. "Ah, you haven't read Woodhouse yet. Arch-mannered humor, you'll see." Then, as if anticipating my early mutiny against O'Brien in deference to Woodhouse, his eyes narrowed and he instructed, "Keep up with the O'Briens for now." We left for the hospital, armed with our respective books. On the way, I mentioned that Raymond Chandler, also English, and Woodhouse had both attended the posh prep school, Dulwich College. "Dulwich, but spelled Dulwich," my husband said, surprised by the Chandler. Our bookish, competent doctor always wanted to know what we were reading. My husband waved the Woodhouse at him. "It has a blurb by Ogden Nash," he said, and read, "In my salad days, I thought that P.G. Woodhouse was the funniest writer in the world. Now I've reached the after-dinner coffee stage, and I know that he is." "Wodehouse," the doctor said, reading from the book jacket and making a note on his prescription pad. "No, Wood, pronounced Woodhouse. I hope he's still funny," my husband said, peering at the doctor over his glasses. "I'm way past the after-dinner coffee. I've reached the medicine stage." A week later, we were again side by side, my husband's bed rising smoothly and electronically to a barely comfortable position I'd tried to match with pillows, despairing of the difference in height. I'd finished Master and Commander and put it in a safe place because the doctor had meticulously written his home phone number inside its cover. Post Captain was next. My husband's long fingers, thin and bony, were oddly free of books because he was listening to the tape of O'Brien's latest Aubrey Maturin, The Wine-Dark Sea. His eyes were alertly closed beneath the Walkman's earphones, curving over his new, silky growth of hair. When he stopped listening to take his pills, I asked him to recall what he'd liked best about Post Captain. I closed my eyes against a hysterical welling up of water. And when he told me, I thought, yes, yes. After years of reading and rereading, arguing, damning, and praising, I knew now almost exactly what he would say. Although I didn't tell him this, but tested more. I badgered him about the repetition of one battle scene after another, asked him to name his favorite title in the series, asked him if Maturin ever dies. I moved on to Ford's The Good Soldier. Didn't the narrator's equivocation grate on his nerves? Yes and no. Who was Dante's best translator? Yes, yes. And what did he think of the poem Pale Fire? Stop it, he said, his voice stronger than it had been in days. Enough. The next evening, when he'd finished both sides of the first tape, he told me to look in his desk for a second Walkman. Why didn't matter. Now, listen to this tape, he said. You're still seducing me with literature, I accused him. He took the tape from his Walkman and inserted it into mine. No, I can't, I said. I'll get the plots mixed up. Already I was awash in the unfamiliar worlds of sloops and frigates, admiring of royals, baffled by masts and yards, and dipping in and out of a sea of words, a lexicon and companion for Patrick O'Brien's seafaring tales, chastely beside me on the bed. In love again. Here, he said. Listen. I donned the earphones, and because he was watching, I closed my eyes. Across the tiny gulf between our beds, his hand found my hand as a calming voice began. A purple ocean, vast under the sky and devoid of all visible life apart from two minute ships racing across its immensity. Until my husband's hand slipped from mine, until his breath failed, until I called 911, until the ambulance arrived to provide our last voyage together. On that last evening, I sailed precariously in two different seas, astride two listing vessels, keeping a third in view against a dark horizon, reading in his wake.